So we also welcome our director, Professor Alok Pandey. Sir, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Thank you very much, Professor Agarwal and Dr. Dietmar Ernst. It's a pleasure to see you here. I learned German while I was in my post-graduation. So they call it Guten Morgen, right?
Oh, Guten Morgen.
And it's an afternoon though here in India. And we are so thankful to you for have accepted our invitation to interact with the audience in India. I can see this program. This is now third day where they have discussed the basics of financial modeling and something on equity valuation. And we'll be hearing you on on a particular topic. In fact, probably I think you are discussing project valuation or portfolio management, something like that.
Project valuation.
Project valuation. Yeah, in fact, project evaluation once again is an important aspect of management education everywhere because it has far-reaching consequences. If taught in first year, it can help you do that course on project management in second year better. India has a two-tier, in India, management education works on two levels. One is the accounting courses, which are run under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Cost Accountants of India. But we have management institutes which are run under All India Council for Technical Education, where these two-year programs have first-year courses which are the general courses and the second-year specialized courses. We at this institute are trying to ensure that financial modeling or Excel-based programming, Excel-based courses or the spreadsheet analysis is taught in the very first 3 months to the students so that they're able to utilize it everywhere, because no longer like information technology is part of every course. Finance also is a part of every course actually. That you can't really teach marketing without finance, and you can't really talk about human resource management because everywhere there's a budget involved, there's a cost element involved, everywhere there's amortization processes involved. So I think project evaluation using Excel, new techniques, it will be great to hear from you. I am here initially to welcome you. Probably I'll switch off my video, but your talk I'll keep hearing because in my office I am actually working here. I think it would be probably early in the morning in Germany.
Yes, it's around 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. So yes. Here also it's 1:30, and a lot of work as the head of the institution keeps going on. But I definitely keep hearing you, and please forgive me for that if I switch my video off. But yes, there is a large audience of close to 80-90 people who are waiting to hear you. So thank you very much, sir, for being here. And let's keep in touch on all these platforms, and let's ensure that in future also we can have some connection, and we can have some association with you and the institution where you are working, because it's one big world, and COVID has helped us through this technology. It made us easier to interact with professors around the world. So thank you once again for accepting our invitation, and let's hope that it will be a great interaction for you as well as for the audience.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and I just want to underline that we are also interested in a future cooperation with your institution. I have in my master program always students from India, and they are great ambassadors for your country. And it has been 20 years when I was the first and the last time in India, but I enjoyed that very much. And I hope that we can exchange, that your colleagues can come to Germany and maybe some of us to India to strengthen a further cooperation between our institutions. That would be great.
No, I'll be writing a separate email from my international linkages head, Professor Richa Agarwal. I will request Professor Pankaj Agarwal to help Dr. Richa, connect. I'll write for first mail. I'll write personally to Dr. Ernst, and then we can, take the process forward in years to come. Probably COVID has made slightly life difficult for all the travelers, and international linkages in conventional sense may not work, but let's start something, some activity.
Definitely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request our Dean Academics, Dr. Tapan K Nayak, to say a few words for Dr. Ernst, Dietmar Ernst.
Okay, I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Dietmar Ernst. I'm really honored to talk to you today because I also love the international cooperation, and we appreciate the work which is done in India in financial modeling, financial engineering, and IT. And we love your progress, your country. And as I mentioned, I have always students from India in my master courses, and they are great ambassadors of your country. And so I'm really keen on getting in touch with you, with your institution. Maybe a few words about myself. I studied
may I interrupt, sir? May I interrupt you?
Yes, of course.
Sir, would you let me have this honor of introducing you?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry for that.
Yeah, let me introduce you, sir. Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but just let me have this honor. Yeah. So, Professor Dr. Dietmar Ernst is an authority on financial modeling with a highly acclaimed book on the subject from Springer. He is a professor of finance and is currently director of master's program in international finance at a very prestigious HFWU Nuertingen Geislingen University Germany. I'm sorry for my German. I mean, I may not have spoken it correctly.
It's perfect.
Thank you, sir. Earlier, he was director of German Institute of Corporate Finance. Along with academia, he has also handled senior positions in industry with leading banks of Germany. He holds 2 doctorate degrees. That is why you see that there are 2 dr dot attached prefix to his name. One is in economic theory, and the second one is in economic geography. So that is hallmark of an intellectual giant. We are so happy to have you. His areas of interest include investment banking, corporate finance, valuations, mergers and acquisitions, and leveraged buyout and private equity. Of course, this is a very small snippet which I could gather from his CV. It's a huge CV, and so much I have not included. But I think based on whatever I have included, I think, it's such a privilege to have him here. I would like to end this introduction by saying that Professor Dietmar Ernst is also a certified financial modeler. And as I anticipate, I think by the end of the program, he will also guide us how we can acquire this qualification briefly. So that is the introduction. Over to you, Dr. Gaurav.
Thank you so much, sir. We welcome you, Professor Ernst. Now I would invite Dr. Tapan Kumar Nayak for inviting and saying a few words for Professor Ernst.
Dr. Tapan, please.
Sir, Tapan sir, please unmute yourself, please. Tapan sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have unmuted.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Saab, please go ahead.
Yeah, can I audible? May I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav, Professor Agarwal, Honorable Director, Professor Alok Pandey, the Chief Guest, Professor Dietmar Ernst. It's once again a privilege. It's a sheer privilege. I am elated and I'm delighted. I'm honored to once again welcome you, Professor Dietmar Ernst, to IMS Ghaziabad online faculty development program. We also feel privileged to thank you from the bottom of our heart to accept our invitation to be here today with us. And I'm sure all my colleagues, all the participants of this faculty development program will get a lot of things from your enriching experiences. And I'm sure I personally, while I was listening to Professor Agarwal, that both the doctorates from economics area, I was literally, from the bottom of my heart, I'm saying that I feel really elated to have you here. And thank you so much. I'm sure I personally will be there throughout your session. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you today. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for being with us today. And welcome you on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tapan Kumar Nayak. Professor Ernst, we heartily welcome you to this online one-week FDP, and we hope that all participants feel enriched after listening to you today on the theme Project Evaluation using Excel. Sir, please, the session is yours now. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope everybody can understand me pretty well. I'm going to share my screen with you. I've prepared some slides and a Excel working document for you. And after the lecture, you get, of course, the master document provided by Dr. Pankaj. If it's okay for you, I would like to share my screen. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Perfect, sir. That is important.
Okay. So whenever you have questions, please interrupt me. I'm used to it to answer questions whenever questions occur. If I'm a little bit too slow, please tell me. If I'm a bit too fast, tell me. So I'm really highly flexible and would like to adjust my speed so that everybody can follow what I'm going to present you today. Okay, now I click here to share my screen. And I go over to my PowerPoint presentation. Can you see that? Ah, that's perfect.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
so I'm going to talk about different topics today, starting with the net present value, followed by the internal rate of return and modified internal rate of return and sensitivity analysis. If time is left, I would like to proceed with the scenario analysis, and finally, if there is time left, with the Monte Carlo simulation. But we don't hurry today, so if there are some topics left you are interested in, maybe we can arrange another session to discuss those very interesting topics. So first of all, a little bit kind of a theory. So the net present value method is, of course, the most frequently used approach in finance in order to assess investment opportunities. And in contrast to the static methods like the break-even analysis, we can include in those assessments different times of different points of time. This means that we incorporate in our models the time, and the goal of our calculation is to discount the future cash flows, could be cash in, could be cash outs, in order to get the so-called present value of a project. And the present value is finally the difference between the discounted cash inflows and the discounted cash outflows related to an investment time T0. And if you follow the net present value method, you can make decisions based on the results. That means if you have a positive net present value, the investment should be made. If the net present value is equal to 0, you are indifferent, so you can invest, but you are not obliged to invest, though you don't make any losses or earnings by that, profits by that. And if the net present value is negative, the investment should be turned down. So that are the basic rules. And I created a small model for you to apply the net present value and the following valuation methods. So we always use the same model so that you don't have to jump between different approaches. So, and if we go to our Excel model, you can see a little bit the standards of financial modeling. I, of course, won't repeat that because you had that before, but that is kind of our approach. What we always do is we have a model. Sometimes they are huge. This is a smaller one, but we display in a separate module always the assumptions. So all assumptions are data we get from outside, and the cells with the orange background color, these are hard-coded numbers. You see, if I click here, these are just numbers I entered into the model. And in order to show that these numbers are entered manually, we gave them a orange background color. And all other cells are calculations, and they always have a light gray background color like that one. So you see, this is the link. A link is not an entered number, so therefore it gets also the light gray color. And if we have any open cells with no hard-coded numbers or without calculation, we use the dark gray color. So that is a little bit our approach. And what we do is we separate assumptions from calculations and a management summary. And one of the most important rules of our standard financial modeling standards is that we don't include any hard-coded numbers in our calculations. So you see here in that sub-module, we always use only and exclusively gray background color, because here we calculate without entering numbers. And this has the big advantage in applied work. If you discuss models, very often you don't discuss the way you calculate, you more are discussing the assumptions. And then you have the assumption in one worksheet. And another big advantage is once you change a number here, then the model is automatically adjusted. That is also one of the big advantages. So here we find the assumptions, for example, the cost, so the cash outs like acquisition costs, energy costs, maintenance, employee training, and we furthermore here display and show the positive cash ins, which are reduced personal costs, additional revenues, and as we have to discount future cash flows, we need to also determine an interest rate which should be risk adjusted to the project. That means here we have a risk adjusted interest rate in order to discount the future cash flows. So, and with those data and information, we can set up our model. And you see it's a very, very small model. And what we modeled here is, on the one hand, the cash outflow and the cash inflow. And cash outflow and cash inflow together gives the relevant cash flow of the project. The date of valuation is here T0. So this is the date where we assess the project and where we make a decision to conduct the project or not. So what we have here, kind of cash outflows. So cash is going out of the company for the project for acquisition costs. This is a one-time investment of 145,000 euros in that case, but could of course be any currency. And during the project, we have further costs like energy costs, 5,000 euros per year, maintenance, 2,000 euros per year, and in T0, additionally, a employee training. And if we sum all the cash outs, we get the sum of cash outflows, which is displayed in row 24. But of course, we expect also positive cash in from our project. So we benefit from reduced personal cost, 8,000 euros per year, additional revenues, 36,000 euros per year. And if we sum the cash inflows, we get the sum of cash inflows here. And now we subtract from the cash inflows the cash outflows, and then we get the cash flow of the project. So I've just to change because I'm still in the master document. Sorry for that. I'm just, this is the master document. Just give me a second. I have to open our working document. Just give me a second. I'm going to open it here, the working document. Yes, because we want to calculate now. And in order to discount the future cash flows of our project with the help of our interest rate, we first have to calculate the discount factor. And here we use the well-known formula for the discount factor, which is 1 divided by, in brackets, 1 plus interest rate to the power of the relevant period. And the relevant period I take from row 17, so that the formula itself is 1 divided by, in brackets, 1 plus C13 to the power of C17. And then we get for the first year, of course, because this is the date of valuation. So at the time we assess the project, we have those cash outs. The discount factor is 0. In the next steps, we have to fix the interest rate by clicking here in C13 and pressing the F4 button, and then we get those dollars in front of the row and the column. And now the cell is fixed, so it won't be changed if I copy the whole formula. And that is what I'm going to do now. Now I've prepared the formula. So I have to do that again. So now it's fixed. And one of our rules or in financial modeling standard is only to have one type of calculation per row, so that we can focus here and concentrate on the equation in the first cell. And now I'm able to copy that to the right. And I get automatically my discount factor. And that is really one of the golden rules of financial modeling, not to use different formulas in one row, but separate if there are different formulas in different rows. And here we apply only one type of formula per row. So that allows us to copy and paste the whole formula. And with the help of the discount factor, we can now calculate the net present value of our cash flows just by multiplying, by multiplying the cash flows with the discount factors. And again, we use one calculation, one formula per row that allows us now to copy paste. And now we have the net present value of our cash flows from T0 to T5. And now in the last step, we just can sum the net present values in order to get the net present value of the project. So here I use sum, confirm that by the tabulator, and now I include here the row C35 to H35. I can confirm that by pressing the enter button, and we get now a net present value of 707. So what does it mean? It means, remembering our decision rules, we have a net present value larger than 0, and our recommendation now would be to invest in that project, because we can expect an interest rate higher 7%. So that is the way, if we manually, without any Excel function, calculate the net present value. That's the way which is done and presented here. Regarding the Excel functions, it's of course helpful to use them, but even if we work on highly sophisticated models in company evaluation, I always work with the discount factors because I would like to see the value of the discount factors. So I feel more comfortable to use here discount factors as the Excel function net present value, which is presented in the next step. So what I want to say is it is not automatically better to use more functions in Excel. It very much depends on what you personally would like to achieve and what is your personal working style. So that is just something I would like to mention before we proceed with the net present formula, value formula in Excel. Okay, do you have any questions regarding the model, the setup of the model, or is everything clear?
So no questions till now, sir.
Okay, perfect. If I'm too slow and you want me to hurry up, I'm more than happy to do so. So please let me know. Now we jump over to the formulas net present value. And here we have the same formulas. And now we want to apply the net present value formula, the net present value formula in order to calculate the net present value. So first of all, we calculate the cash flows of the project, which is in our case C29 minus C29 minus C24. So, and again, here we can copy, paste, and then we get the relevant numbers. So if you want to have here the minus a little bit more highlighted, of course, it's not a problem. With a mouse click, right button mouse click, you can open here format cells. And then you go to number and you say you want to have this with a minus in front and with a red color. And now I would like you to apply the following formula in Excel. So we go to the window here above and enter here equals net present value. So please fill in the relevant interest rate and the relevant values. I give you here 1 or 2 minutes just to do that by yourself, and then I'm coming back to you. Okay, if you just apply the formula with our further background, you would enter here the rate, which is the interest rate. This means cell C13. And then I see here value 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And my students usually just entering here our cash flow row, starting from C30, 31 to H31. So if we use the net present value formula in that way, and now we press on enter, we get a net present value of 661. And if we now compare that number with the net present value we calculated before, we see there's a difference. In the current situation, it's not a big problem because both net present values would be positive. So our conclusion would be to invest. but assume a project with a net present value around 0, then a difference of, here in that case, 40 and a little bit more could make a difference in your investment decision. And now we have to ask and to question, why do we get different results using the Excel model and the Excel function net present value and calculating the net present value manually? The problem is when you apply the net present that your cash flow row starts in T1. And here we used a cash flow of the year T0. And now Excel has following interpretation. Excel assumes that the minus 151,000 euros occur in T1 and the 37,000 euros in T2 and following. So that means we have to adjust our net present value formula. We have to replace now C31 by D31 and then manually add the cash flow in T0. So now our formula looks like net present value, C13, that's the interest rate for the cash flows D31, starting in T1 to H31, this is the cash flow in T5. And then we have to manually add the investment in T0. And doing so, and pressing now the Enter button, we get a net present value of 707. And now if we compare that to the calculation here, we get identical net present values. What is the lesson learned from that? The lesson learned from that, whenever you apply the first time a Excel function, it is always recommended to calculate the value also manually. And if you get the same results, from now on you can, you know how Excel calculates, and you know that the results of the calculation is in line of your expectations and the way you would manually calculate the value. So that is very, very important. Otherwise, here Excel is a kind of black box because we don't know the algorithm behind the Excel function. So therefore we need to try it a little bit to find out how Excel calculates the values. And if we understood it, from now on we can apply the net present value formula. And we know that Excel expects that the first value here is the value in T0. And if there is additionally a value in T1, if there's additionally a value in T0, we have to manually add that. So that is about the net present value function in Excel. Do you have questions regarding the net present value formula so
None,
far?
sir. None, sir.
Okay. So if that is not the case, I would proceed with the internal rate of return. Go over to my PowerPoint presentation. And the internal rate of return is a different form of evaluating projects. In the private equity business, I work for a private equity company, we always used the internal rate of return as a benchmark for making an investment decision. So our expected benchmark and expected return was always 15%. And then we evaluated the project, and if you got a a internal rate of return higher than 15%, we would invest in that project or in that company. So the internal rate of return plays a very important role in investment banking, especially in the private equity business. And if you look a little bit on the definition of the internal rate of return, then we see that the internal rate of return is the interest rate that gives a net present value of 0. So project with a given expected return, and if the IRR is larger than the expected return, we would invest in the project. If it's equal, we are indifferent, and if the IRR is smaller than the expected return, the investment would be unfavorable and the expected return cannot be realized. With that information, that background, we go back to our model. And now we go over to IRR, which stands for the internal rate of return. So we have always the same numbers. And now the internal rate of return can be calculated easily. So we are entering now the shortcut for internal rate of return, that is IRR. And now we have only to enter the values. And in order to support the calculation, you could enter here a number where you say, I expect that number around the following interest rate or return. So that could be maybe here the expected return of the project. So I enter here 0.07. And then I get an internal rate of return of 7.17%. So now I can compare that with the expected return of 7%, and I would now come to the conclusion that the project would be favorable and we would invest in that project. Do you have any questions regarding that way of calculation? You see, it's pretty simple. You are just entering here the cash flows and the expected return, and then you automatically get the IRR calculated.
Sir, no questions. Just for the sake of our audience, for their benefit, let me inform you that there are two different conventions which we follow in India and Germany for decimals and commas. In Germany, commas are used in place of decimals, and decimals are used in place of comma. So if you are concerned what is happening on this sheet, so this decimal actually in the last line of IRR is represented as comma here. Just I thought, let me inform.
Okay, so I can change that. This was
no, that's perfect.
Impolite by not changing that in advance. So it's not a big deal. I'm just clicking here and replace here the decimal separator here and the thousand separator. Sorry for that.
No, it's perfectly okay, sir. No, it's okay.
No,
I mean, at least we all learned something that there is a different convention possible.
Yes, thank you very much for that beneficial comment. Yes, now I changed it and now it's in line with the Indian way of using the numbers. Okay, perfect. So the IRR has some disadvantage, and for that reason, the modified IRR was introduced. So the modified internal rate of return, the shortcut is MIRR, is also a financial measure to determine the attractiveness of an investment. And it can be used to compare different investment opportunities. Essentially, the modified internal rate of return is a slight modification of the IRR formula, which resolves some problems associated with the internal rate of return. So what can be resolved, what could be solved with the MIRR? For example, one of the main problems with the IRR is the assumption that the obtained positive cash flow is reinvested at the same rate at which they were generated. So if you use the IRR, you have the assumption included in that way of calculating that the positive cash flows which are paid out to you as an investors are reinvested at the same IRR as calculated in the project. And the question is that realistic or not? I would say rather not. Alternatively, the MIRR considers that the proceeds, so the positive cash flows of a project, will be reinvested at the external rate of return, which is also called reinvestment rate. And the reinvestment rate can be determined by the investor, so it can be manually set up, and that helps a lot to refine the IRR approach. And negative cash flow, so if we take on money to finance our project, they are subject to interest at the internal debit interest rate or interest rate for borrowed capital, and that is called a financing rate. Or in other words, if you take on money from the bank, you calculate with the interest rate provided by the bank. So we differentiate now two different rates. First, the reinvestment rate for the positive cash flows and the financing rate for the negative cash flows. A further problem with IRR calculation, that was the reason why we had to enter the expected return in the IRR formula, that sometimes if you use the IRR formula, you have two or more possible solutions. And then you have to figure out which makes sense or doesn't make sense. So that also can be solved by the modified internal rate of return. So we avoid, by using MIRR, unnecessary confusion regarding the correct outcome. That was basically the first introduction to that way of financing. And now we go over to our model. So you find here the MIRR. So first of all, we use the MIRR formula provided by Excel, and then we conduct a plausibility check. Is Excel correct calculating or not? Basically, we always assume that Excel is correctly calculated, and usually it does, but what we have to question are the assumptions behind the way Excel is calculating. So the first step would be pretty easy. So we use here the MIRR formula. So we press the tabulator, then we are already in the model and the function. And now we have to enter the values. And here we are allowed to include the value of T0. So in contrast to the net present value calculation, Excel now expects that the first value is the value from T0. So that means that we can now enter the whole cash flow row. And now we have to additionally add the finance rate and the reinvestment rate. The finance rate is the rate, interest rate the banks provide the financing of our project. In our model, it would be 6%. And furthermore, we have to enter the reinvestment rate. So that means if you have positive cash flow and this is paid out to the investor, how is that money reinvested? And here we assume a reinvestment rate of 8%. So now we press the bottom and we get a modified internal rate of return of 7.53%. And if we compare it to the IRR we got from our IRR calculation, it's higher. So that means that this is a more conservative approach. And if you apply MIRR, you can assume that this is more conservative for the investors than using the IRR. Okay, and now I would like to show and to calculate with you the modified internal rate of return manually. That is what we learn when we use formulas like that. Then we have to check out, is that the way Excel calculates, is that correct or not? So we have here first the T, then we have the cash outflows. So then we have here the present value, then we have cash inflows, and we have here the future value. So now you can read it a little bit better. So first of all, we list here the cash outflows. The cash outflows, it's here like, I just take it from C25. And I just link here the cells. You could also use the transpose function, but I think it's more confusing than beneficial for our purposes. So I have now here our cash outflows. So, and this is the money I have to pay. And now I have my cash inflows. So in T0, we have 0, and then we have, sorry, I've chosen the wrong row. I think you realized that, so sorry for that. I have to go down to the sum of the cash flows, of course. So. Sorry. So I have to delete everything here and do that, restart it again. So that is always a problem if you are a bit too fast and you make mistakes. It's better to be calm and concentrated. So here, this is the relevant row. So here we are. So this is just linking the relevant cash flows from our calculation above. And for the cash outflows, we calculate now the present value. For the cash inflows, we calculate the future cash flow, the future value. So what we need to do, we have just to discount the future cash outflows, similar to our calculation here for the prototype net present value. And we use the cash outflow divided by, open the bracket, 1 plus. And now it's for the cash outflows, we apply our financing rate. These are the 6% here. And then to the power of t. And t we find in the cell C41. Okay, that is the relevant formula. And now the only thing we have to fix is the financing rate. That means the cell C13. By pressing F4, you see the dollar signs in front of the column and in front of the row. That means the cell is now fixed. And we confirm that by pressing the enter button. And now, again, according to financial modeling rules, we have one type of formula per column. And now we can here draw down and we get the relevant net present values. And you see that here in cell E47, we use a different formula afterwards. Sometimes you can't avoid that there are different types of calculations in one column or one row. If that's the case, we have here a line to indicate here we have to stop. We are not supposed to copy paste over the line. That is also a little bit playing with different types of lines, which gives us additional information in financial modeling. So in the next step, we calculate the future value of the cash inflows using the reinvestment rate, which would be in C14, the 8%. So, and we use basically the same formula, but only in the other direction. So we discounted here all the cash flows to the point T0, and now we want to know the future value in T5. So the formula is then the cash inflows times, in brackets, 1 plus the reinvestment rate. I have to scroll up a little bit. It's here in C14. Close the bracket to the power of, and now we have to be a bit careful. So I have to go over. Now we don't use, because we want to know the value in T5, therefore we now use for the value in T0 the factor 5. So that the formula would be now F41 plus, in brackets, 1 plus C14 to the power of C46. So I enter the formula, and as the cash inflow in T0 is 0, also the future value is 0. Now the problem is a little bit that I can't fix F14 and copy paste, because here those factors go into the other direction. So here we started for the present value from 0 to T5, and now it's the other way around. If you want to optimize that from a financial modeling perspective, you could add now the T in the other direction. So starting T5 down to T0. Then you can copy paste, but you can also manually calculate that. So what we can do, we just copy it down and then we just change here the factors. So, but I have to fix C14 by pressing F4. So, and now I have to manually change here the cells for the time T. You see, in financial modeling, that could be a solution, but it would be better to have here a single column with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because what we always try to avoid is, in financial modeling, the likelihood that we make errors. And if we do something manually, it's always a certain likelihood that I make a mistake. So therefore, now we have to manually change. It's now, instead of F47, it's F42, F43, F44, F45, and C46. So I'm just checking it out. So now I made a mistake I didn't want to make. So because I have to go the other way around, I have to here with 45 to start with 45. So now you see in a very good example which mistake and errors could occur if you work manually. And so now it is correct. But you see, this is a very simple calculation, and I made a mistake. Why? Because I wasn't 100% concentrated or too much concentrated. So please, whenever you set up your financial model, try to model it in a very professional way so that you can really reduce the likelihood of mistakes like that. So what could be the solution for that? I just want to show it to you. You could here just here, and now you enter or you copy here the row in the column, and now you just replace 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And now we can easily use here in our formula. And then you have the big advantage that you now can just copy paste. So this would be now a more professional approach. But we want to learn because sometimes you don't have the time or you don't have the necessary background, but always in your model try to build them up in a way that you really reduce the likelihood of errors. That is really the key to successful financial modeling. So what we're doing in the next step, we sum the present values and we sum the future values. And now we can calculate the modified internal rate of return by using the MIRR formula. That would be here the sum of the future values divided by the sum of the present value. And then we draw the fifth root of that term. In Excel, we can model that as follows. That would be the future value divided by the sum of the present values. Now we can't use in Excel a function which would be here the fifth root of that term. Now we need a similar approach which leads to the same result. We calculate that term by the power of 1 divided by 5. And then we have to subtract -1. So that is the MIRR formula. So it's here the sum of the future value divided by the sum of the present values. And then we draw the fifth root, which is here the number of periods, 1 to 5. So it's here determined by cell. You can replace that basically by here cell C46 -1. And now we see we get a modified internal rate of return of 7.42%. And we recognize that there is a difference between the result using the Excel MIRR function and our manual calculation. And now the question is, which of the two numbers are correct? We already learned from the net present value that we need to be cautious using those Excel functions. And what is always helpful in financial modeling, if you get two different results, that you do a plausibility check. So what we now do is we try, or we will calculate the manual modified internal rate of return with another approach, and then we can compare which of the numbers is correct, the one provided by Excel or our manual calculation. So first of all, for our check, we calculate the absolute increase in value, which is just the difference between the future value and the present value. So it's H47 minus E47. So we get now a 77,644. So in the next step, we calculate the growth rate over 5 years, which is the future value divided by the present value minus 1. So this is the growth rate over 5 years. And if we now calculate the annual growth rate, we get the modified internal rate of return. And then we compare that result with the results above, and we will see which of the results is correct. So now we calculate, so we convert the 5-year growth rate into an annual growth rate. This is done with help of the following formula: 1 plus the 5-year growth rate. And again, we draw the first root. So we take the 1 plus the 5-year growth rate to the power of 1 divided by 5. And then we subtract minus 1. So I just repeat the formula. It's in brackets 1 plus G53 to the power of, in brackets, 1 divided by C46. And then we subtract minus 1. And we see, with the help of that plausibility check, the result of our manual calculation is confirmed. And what we do is we visualize the result of that plausibility check by using a if formula. Now we can say if G54 equals G49, so this is the logical test, then we want to see the text okay, and if it's not the same value, we got the information and the text deviation. Okay. So in a big model, you couldn't spot easily that the plausibility check is okay. And in order to highlight that, we use now the function conditional formatting. You find that if you go on home and then you a little bit shift to the right, and then you find here conditional formatting. And that is a very convenient tool. We click on that little arrow here and then highlight cell rules is what we want to have. And our if function is in the logical test equals, so we go down now to equal to. So format cells that are equal to, and now we say okay. That should be highlighted with a green fill with dark green text. And now we press on OK. What is happening? I have to repeat. Maybe it didn't accept here. I have to here insert only OK. Maybe only OK. Just a word. And now it works. So here just OK. That is enough. And then you click on OK. And now you see that at one glance that the check is okay. And what you also could do in a financial model, if you have more than one plausibility checks, you can create a worksheet plausibility check and link all the plausibility checks in one worksheet. And then you see if all your checks are correct or not. In case there would be a deviation, we can also use the conditional formatting. And we say highlight rules equal to. And now we say deviation should be highlighted with light red fill with dark red text. So I just check it out. If I take instead of G49, the MIRR I got from Excel. now it will indicate there's a deviation. And that is the way we use the conditional formatting for our plausibility checks. And there's also one recommendation in financial modeling. Please implement as many plausibility checks as possible. This has one big advantage. So if you create a big model, like in company evaluation, we have maybe 20, 25 worksheets, and they all depend on each other. And it finally turns out there is somewhere an error in your model. You spend hours and days for searching the error. And if you have implemented a lot of those plausibility checks, you can say, well, in that area, there's no mistake. And then you can limit the area where the mistake or the error could occur, and then you could easily solve that problem. Okay, but nevertheless, the question is still, why is there deviation between the MIRR function and our manual calculation? The reason is that the MIRR calculation based on Excel uses here that row of cash flows. And we have only one negative cash flow. And that cash flow uses an interest rate of 6%. All other cash flows are assumed as being positive using the reinvestment rate. But we have in our cash flows in one period, like T1, outflows and cash inflows. And if you calculate the modified internal rate of return correctly, you have to discount the cash outflows with the finance rate and to calculate the future value of the cash inflows using the reinvestment rate. And that is not considered in the modified internal rate of return function. So that again means be careful using those Excel functions. And in case it would be more suitable and appropriate to use here a manual calculation. And the big advantage is for manual, if you use manual calculations, you could easily explain people how MIR works. And modeling means understanding. It's not a big art to use any Excel function not knowing what is behind. The art is to model it in a way that you understand it and that your students or your customer understand what you are doing. If your customer don't understand what you've calculated, they would never trust you and would never sign a contract or make a decision. So you need to be transparent, and financial modeling helps us to be transparent. Okay, that was a little bit about the modified internal rate of return. And now we come to a very important instrument in corporate finance, in portfolio management, in all finance areas. This is a sensitivity analysis. So I go back to my presentation, and maybe only a few words about sensitivity analysis. Some people call it stress test. That is what is done with all the banks in Europe. So they have to do a stress test to see, are they stable enough in case a crisis occurs. And of course, it pretty much makes sense to apply a sensitivity analysis also for a project. So this is a very important and integral part of a project analysis, to use a sensitivity analysis. And that shows us the causal relations between input and output variables in our models. Or in other simpler words, we see how the input they affect the output. Is there a strong dependence, or if there's a small change in the input, what is the result in our output? Is it linear, or is it a big change? So we see how sensitive the output reacts to changes of the input variables. So that is a very important knowledge we can gain using sensitivity analysis, and it also shows us how stable the model is. What is happening if I change the inputs? Is the model still stable or will it crash? And with the help of data tables, we can model relatively easily a sensitivity analysis. And I remember 20 years ago in the M&A business, when we had to value companies, we did that manually. And the problem was, if there was one change in the assumptions, we had to recalculate everything. So that was really very time intensive. And with the help of the data tables, we have no big problem creating a sensitivity analysis. And I would like to show you how it works. First, we start with one variable, and then we add one variable with another variable so that we get a matrix out of two variables for the value driver of the model. Okay, that leads us back to sensitivity analysis one variable. So this is the sensitivity analysis for one variable, then we use two variables. So you see, it's again the same model. And now I already prepared a little bit the outline of our model. And of course, a very, very important value driver in the net present value calculation and project management is the interest rate. So that is the central value driver. And now we want to see how will or would be the net present value changed if there are changes in the interest rate. And here we just check out what is the interest rate we assumed to be in our regard as realistic, because we determined here 7% for good reasons. Maybe we made a risk analysis, and then we came up that we expect in the future, and we plan with an interest rate of 7%. So that is obviously the most realistic interest rate. So therefore, we fill in here in cell I41 just the number 7%. So this is here manually entered. And now you could easily enter here different interest rates. So I personally love it to work with intervals I define here. And now I have to find out which interval is realistic. So I calculate smaller interest rates and higher interest rates. What is the interval for a higher interest rate? Is it from 7.0 to 7.1, or is it from 7.0 to 7.25, or is it from 7.0 to 7.5? So you have to find out which intervals makes pretty much sense. And I personally wouldn't exceed a range of, here in that case, 6 to 8%, because all other values or interest rates lower than 6% and higher than 8% would be unrealistic. That means I work here with an interval of 0.25%. So I manually enter here the 0.25%. And now I can calculate the lower interest rates and the higher interest rates. What is the big advantage using those intervals? When all of a sudden one of you say, well, I don't think that the 0.25% is realistic, I'd rather would like to work with 0.1%, then I only change here the number, and the rest then in my sensitivity analysis is automatically adjusted. That is the reason why I love to work with those intervals. Okay, now we can calculate the interest rates lower than 7% with an interval of 0.25%. So that would be now I41 minus, And now I use my interval here, the 0.25%. And the only thing now I have to do now is to fix the I38 by pressing F4, so setting dollar signs in front of the column and the row. And now I can enter that. Okay, now again, you know, financial modeling, as simple as possible. We can just copy that left. And now we get here the first range from 6 to 7%. And the same we want to do from 7 to 8%. We use the same formula. Instead of using a minus, we now use a plus. So I41 plus, and now again my interval. It's I38, and again I have to fix it by pressing F4. And now I can pull that right, and I get the range from 7 to 8%. So, and what you see, this is a completely separated table from the model above. Now we have to link the model with our table here in order to run the sensitivity analysis. And now this is something you just need to know how it is done. You use here the cell which is located basically one column left from the first cell and one row down, so that it is here located in D42. Because afterwards I have to mark the whole area. And this is the area from D41 to M42. And that area here should include also the output of the model. So what I do now, I just link the cell D42 with the output, the result of my project evaluation with my net present value. So, and now I've linked the output of the model with my data table here. And now I have to feed the model with my interest rate, with my input variable. And in order to do so, I have to mark now the whole area from D41 to M42. And now, and this is only a last step, and then we are already done. I go to data, and then over to what if analysis. And if I click here on that little arrow, I have the choice between Scenario Manager, Goal Seek, and Data Table. And Data Table is what I need. So what Excel doesn't provide a function called sensitivity analysis. So the sensitivity analysis is part of the function data table. And now I click here on data table. And now I can enter two different information. First, row input cell and column input cell. So that means for our one variable model here, where is our interest rate located? It is or presented in form of a row. So we find the necessary inputs in a row and not in a column. So for us relevant is now the row input cell. So it just depends how it is displayed. Is it displayed the input in a row or in a column? Here we clearly see it's displayed and presented in a row. So therefore we choose here the row input cell. And now we have to scroll up. And have to tell the data table where is the interest rate which is used for our net present value calculation. And here it's C13. So, and what is now happening? Now Excel takes the different interest rates we determined with the help of our interval, so a range from 6 to 8%, and feeds the model with those interest rates. So now Excel calculates the net present value for an interest rate of 6%, 6.25, 6.5, 6.75, 7, 7.25, and so on. So now for each interest rate, the net present value is calculated. And now we only need to click here on OK. And if we scroll down, we find here our net present values for an interest rate of 7%, it's 707. And of course, if the interest rate is lower, the risk is low of the project, the net present value will increase. And the other direction, if we increase the interest rate, we get a lower net present value. And now we can maybe a little, sorry, can format that again. So clicking on format cell. The right color. And what is the outcome, the result of our sensitivity analysis? If I increase my interest rate only by 0.25%, I already get a negative net present value and wouldn't invest in the project. And now the interesting question is, the 7% represent a planned risk. And if I haven't thoroughly or incorrectly calculated the risk of the project and it increases slightly, then I'm already here on with a negative net present value, and the conclusion would be not to invest in the project. So this, you can see that the net present value reacts very sensitive to changes in our net present and changes in of our interest rate. Maybe you could say now, but I think the 0.25% is too large, that range. Then I say, okay, what would you prefer? Maybe 0.1%. Then I enter now a 0.1%. Now all the intervals are changing and the respective present values as well. So you see how comfortable that model is. So I can, with the help of the interval, just control here my sensitivity analysis. And even if I change now a number here above, that will also be incorporated in our sensitivity analysis. So that is really brilliant. Do you have any questions regarding the sensitivity analysis? Was this too fast, or was it okay for you? If it was a bit too fast, we can exercise that with just taking another variable, and then you can do that by your own. Maybe that is a good idea. So what we are doing now, and then you can exercise it by yourself. We are just copying here our table. So, and now we use, instead of the interest rate, let's say the energy cost. So now we have to look up what are the energy costs I planned. energy cost 5,000. So now I replace the 7% by 5,000. So I have to change the format of my cells. I'm saying here number, but I don't need 2 decimals. So, okay. And now I enter 5,000. Okay. And of course I have to change my interval. It doesn't make sense to, if I have energy cost of 5,000, I have to take an interval of 0.001. That also needs to be changed, of course. Let's do it that way. We also now use a number, and what could be a reliable interval, let's say 100. So you see I fixed C38 that needs now to replaced by I47. And again, we have to fix that. And now I can pull it left. And in J17, I have also to replace I38 by I47. And again, I fix it. Okay. Now we delete here the numbers in row 51. And after preparing our data table, I would kindly ask you to run the sensitivity analysis by your own using data, what if analysis, and data table. Okay. One hint, please, in the first step, link the cell D52 with the net present value of our model. And then you can proceed with data table and insert the relevant input variable. Okay, I give you there 1 or 2 minutes, and then I do it by myself, and then you can compare whether you got similar results. Okay, then just let's compare the results. So what I'm doing first, I link cell E51 with C33. So that is the key. Without the link, the model doesn't work. And now the second step, which is also important, is that you mark here the whole area of the relevant table. And now we go to data, what if analysis, and data table. So here the energy costs are presented in a row. So I have to use here row input cell. And now I go up and use the energy cost as the relevant cell. And now Excel sends all the different energy costs up to cell D8, and with different energy costs now the new net present value is calculated. So I go back and now click on OK. And now I see the net present value for different energy costs. And that is also a very important outcome. I think you are in a project which requires a lot of energy, and we have a volatile energy cost. That could mean that if the energy costs increase from 5,000 to 5,200, we already get a negative net present value. And then maybe the conclusion would be to hedge your energy costs to reduce that risk. And again, if you change here the interval, then it's automatically adjusted. Okay, this is the sensitivity analysis for one variable. In corporate finance, when we do company valuation on a highly professional level, we very often use the growth rate in the terminal value and the WACC, so the cost of capital, as value driver, decisive value drivers, and do a sensitivity analysis for two variables. And to go from a one variable sensitivity analysis to a two variables sensitivity analysis is pretty easy. So in order to learn that, we go now to sensitivity analysis for two variables. Again, the same numbers we already know. And now we have here our interest rate and our energy cost. And what we want to do now, we want to combine and to see for different energy costs and different interest rates what net present value results. So we start off and enter here our planned interest rate. These are the 7%. The energy cost is 5,000. And now we have again to determine the interval for the row, that means the interest rate, and the interval for the column, that means for the energy cost. For the interest rate, we assume an interval of 0.25%. The interval for our energy cost, like we did it in the sensitivity analysis before, is again 100. But you can easily change those numbers. This is not a big deal. And now we do again, we calculate the interest rates and the energy cost using our intervals for the rows and columns. So we start off with the interest rate. And we take the cell I42 minus the interval for the row, the 0.25%. And again, we have to fix that by pressing the F4 button. And now we enter that. And now we can easily draw that left. And the same we do for a range of 7 to 8%. We calculate I42 plus 0.25%, and I30A is fixed again. So now we can pull that right and fill without formatting. So this is exactly the same we did in the sensitivity analysis for one variable. And the same we do for the energy cost. And here we have the lower values, here we have the higher values. So we do the same approach for the energy cost we applied for the interest rate. We calculate now the 5,000 as a planned value minus the interval column 100. And now we are fixing I39 by pressing the F4 button. So fill without formatting. The same for the higher values. So D47 plus, and now our interval column. Again, we have to fix it with the F4 button. And now we can pull it down, fill without formatting. So now our preparatory work is done. Now we have again, like for the sensitivity analysis for one variable, we have to link the output of the model with our data table. What do you think, which cell could be suitable to link the output of the model with our data table? I think it's quite obvious. It's here only, it's the only free cell basically, because that will be filled in with the results of the sensitivity analysis, and the only available cell is here at the corner. So we use here D42 equal C33. And now you go to data, what if analysis, and data table. Maybe you can just try to insert here the correct cells from above. I give you a few seconds. Please try it yourself to see whether it works or not.
And may I use your time, this time, to tell you about a question which has come?
Okay, so we complete that and then
yeah,
we
sure.
can ask the questions. Yes, perfect. Okay, so I scroll up here. Scrolling is not so easy here. And now I have just to check out which information is located in the row. This is our interest rate. So I click here on C13. Which information is in the column? This is the energy cost, and the energy cost I find in C8. And that's it. And now I can click on OK. Oops. Maybe I haven't marked that. Okay, that could happen. So I have to sorry, yes, sorry. So that I have a Mac, and in combination with Windows, it's sometimes a bit difficult. So, okay, I have to redo that again. Data table. So, and this was C13, and the energy, C13, sorry, C13, and now the energy costs are in C8, and now I'm going to click. So, and now I see the result. And what is always interesting just to see, when does it come to a negative net present value, in which combinations. And here you see what we already observed. If I plan an interest rate of 7% and the energy cost rise to 5,200, I'm already here in a negative zone. The same if I underestimated the risk, and the risk would be represented by 7.25%, then I'm also, it's the interesting part. And again, you can now change here. If it's 200, you're welcome to do so, then it's automatically adjusted. Okay, I think this is really a very helpful instrument. And now I'm, of course, more than pleased to answer your questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So before I ask the question, I think we have around 20 minutes left for the session to end. And there has been continuous messages requesting me to request you to move to Monte Carlo if possible, because many people are interested in that. So perhaps that would mean that scenario has to be left because 20 minutes are there. So I'm just conveying this request. Totally your class, sir, and just conveying the request. And secondly, the question is, sir, the question is from Mr. Professor Abraham Joseph. He wants to know, why do we have to hard code the interest rate and energy cost in the data table? Why can't we link them from the assumptions?
It's a good point. I think the problem is that a circularity occurs if you link the model. What I mean, this is here a separated table, which is linked to the model above. And if I link that to the assumption above, it could happen that a circularity occurs which Excel can't solve, but we can try it. So just link it. Yes, that is a good question. So, and then I have to link it here. So it still works. And now I'm just repeating the sensitivity. I'm just deleting the numbers here. And then I have to, so here to mark. We will see whether it works or not. So this was C13 and this was C8. So now you see that you get results which are not in line with with the correct values. And this has to do that due to the link, or based on the result of the link, is that a circularity occurs, and then we get the wrong results. I also wanted to link it because it would make very much sense, but I experienced in the past that then the sensitivity analysis generates incorrect results. So maybe we can solve the problem somehow, but so far I would say please yes, manually insert here the values. So I replace that again by the hard-coded number. So it was a bit too much. And here the 5,000s. And then we run the sensitivity analysis again. So, why is only always here of 700? So now it's okay. I have to mark that. Okay, data table C30, C8. And now I got the, yes, it has to do with the circularity. So obviously Excel doesn't get along and can't link that properly. So yes, that is a bit of disadvantage that I really have to insert that manually. But yes, better to insert that manually and get the correct result as linking it and getting the incorrect results. Yes, that is the reason, the circularity problem. Did I answer your question?
I think so, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a very, very good question. So yes, would be nice to have that solved in that way. Okay, Monte Carlo simulation. That would be basically just the content for an extra lecture, but I just can very quickly show you at least the model. Basically, this Monte Carlo simulation is based on the scenario analysis. In the scenario analysis, you work with basically 3 different scenario: base case, worst case, and best case. And in the Monte Carlo simulation, you work with probably 5,000 scenarios, which you create by the Monte Carlo simulation. So let's go. We find here is here we have the cash flows, and the cash flows are basically the cash flows we calculated here. So here we're talking about those values. And now in the Monte Carlo simulation, we have to define input variables and a output variable or result cell, also called. So the input cell would be here the cash flow and the interest rate, and the result cell would be the net present value. I personally use 2 different software types, either Crystal Ball, which comes from Oracle. It's quite well known, but it's pretty expensive. And another German product called RiskKit. They are both very similar. They are both Excel add-ins. So if you install Crystal Ball and you click on Crystal Ball, you find the surface like that. And it's very user-friendly. It's not really difficult to apply that. And here we have our cash flows for the year T1. And now we don't work with planned cash flows, because here, the cash flows you find here, they are the result of my forecast of my business plan. But these are not expected values. There's a huge difference between a planned value and an expected value. Expected value has as a background a probability distribution, and the planned value is just I as a planner assume that this is, in my opinion, a realistic value. But this has nothing to do with risk or expected value. That is quite interesting. We can share here also information or some articles about that, just to consider and take into consideration as a planned value is not an expected value. An expected value is always a value where a probability distribution is behind. And now we want to create a probability distribution for the cash flows. And here in my simple model, I assumed a triangular distribution. So I say my cash flow has a minimum value of 35,000 euros, a most likely value of 37,000 euros, and a maximum value of 38 million euros. And now I have to define an assumption. So I have to go to Crystal Ball, and now I can click here on Define Assumptions. And here it's already pre-installed a little bit because I prepared that document. I delete the numbers so that we can do that from scratch. So, and now I say the minimum value is 35,000 euros. Okay, the likeliest value is, so it's 37,000 euros, and the maximum value is 38,000 euros. And now I can click on OK. And now the white background color turns into that sharp green background color. That means that Crystal Ball assumes this is a input variable for the Monte Carlo simulation. And now I can here enter any value. I usually use here the planned value, the 37,000 euros. And now I can copy, because here there's no changes in the values I assume. I can now click on copy, and now I can paste. And now I have here for my cash flow from T1 to T5 a triangular distribution function based on those values. And the same I do with the interest rate, and here I assume a normal distribution. Whether you use a triangular normal distribution or other type of distribution very much depends on how realistic the distribution describes the variable. Very often you have some experience, or you can ask experts to find it out. So this is something you have to cope with. Here we assume now okay, so, and again here we say our normal distribution is defined by the expected value and the standard deviation. The expected value I find in cell D22, and the standard deviation in D23. And once I click on OK, you see the green background color. So this is accepted as an input variable. And now I say I take here my, just to get here a number, my expected value. But I have to insert it as 7%, of course, sorry, 7%. So now it's correct, and maybe 2 decimals. I always like it that way. Okay, and going back to Crystal Ball, we can copy the cell because there are no changes, and I can paste that. So, and I just change a little bit the format. 2%. Okay. What else do we need to do in the next step? In the next step, I create my cash flows. So here I know in T0 I have a negative cash flow of, I look it up here, of minus 151,000 euros. So I can insert that now as minus 151,000 euros. Okay, then I have cash flows. And now I link here the cell with the expected cash flow. The same I do for the interest rate, which is also an expected value. I take it here from D21. Now I can calculate the discount factor, which is, as we already know, 1 divided by, in brackets, 1 plus interest rate to the power of the period. Here this is 1 in cell D27. Okay, it's complaining. Oh no, it should be here, divided by, so. Okay. So the net present value now is minus 151,000 euros, and the cash flow times discount factor. So I'm just do that from scratch here, because that is already a pre-formatted cell, and I want you to show how it works. So the net present value now is the sum of here all the net present values. So it's 707. Yes. And now I want to define that as my output cell of the Monte Carlo simulation. So I click now on C36, go back to crystal ball, and click here, define forecast. Now click on OK. And now it gets that blue background color. So that means this is output. Those two numbers are input. And now I can say if here the investment is with the if function, I can complete the sentence. So if the net present value is larger than 0, the investment is advantageous. A second. And sorry, there's an arrow. So, and if it's smaller than 0, it's not is complaining. I've got here. So, why is it? If it's sorry, it's if 0. So, okay, now it should fit. Okay, perfect. So, and now I can run the Monte Carlo simulation. So what is happening now? The Monte Carlo simulation is drawing 5,000 different scenarios of the cash flow based on that given triangular distribution and the interest rate for given a normal distribution function. So it draws from the triangular distribution and the normal distribution numbers, combines them, and here I use 5,000 trials, and then we get a probability function, a histogram for the net present value. So now I click on Start. So now you see how it works. And the result will be a risk profile of my project. Not a single net present value, but a probability function, a histogram of the net present value. And that is basically the input for a further risk management analysis. So that is now the result, and now we can, with the help of some functions, calculate the mean, the standard deviation, or the value at risk. So now you can use this specific crystal ball function for statistics. From here, the net present value, if you want to see the mean. Oops, what is happening now? No, there's, I need another one. 4. This is what I need. But then I already complete the lecture. I don't want to take too much of your precious time. You see, based on that distribution probability function, we expect a expected net present value of 1,202. And then you can calculate the standard deviation, value at risk, and proceed with your risk analysis. So I think the time is over, and I know that you are all very, very busy. So I would now just to end with my lecture and hand over to my valued colleague to summarize our lecture today.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful session, sir. It was really an insightful lecture on project evaluation. It has definitely added value to in our knowledge. And now I would request Professor Pankaj Agarwal to please take over the Q&A section and further elaborate the vote of thanks. Pankaj, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Gaurav sir. But before I begin, I may request Professor Dietmar to spare a couple of minutes to tell us about the CFM qualification and whether we can acquire it from India and how we can do it. Something about it, sir, to motivate us into our further studies of financial modeling. That will be really helpful.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about, can you see it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right? Okay, perfect. What we are offering is the Certified Financial Modeler and the Certified Financial Engineer, and they will be combined in the future, starting from the summer semester 21, in a completely online and digital MBA in applied quantitative finance. So those students in a further education who book that MBA, they will get an MBA plus the certified financial modeler and engineer. The certified financial model and engineer are from the philosophy very similar. In the financial engineer classes, we go a little bit more into quantitative finance regarding derivatives, regarding risk management, regarding company valuation on imperfect capital markets. So it builds up basically. People usually start with the certified financial modeler and then they become a certified financial engineer. And what is the idea behind is it's a course where we use case studies and realistic case studies from the real financial business, where people start with a business plan, then they value a company, they plan with the help of DCF, multiples, they learn about portfolio management, leverage buyout. So they can basically choose one of those fields to become a certified financial modeler. So those who are more expert in portfolio management, they take the portfolio management case studies. Others who are more interested in corporate finance take the corporate finance case study. So these are all practical cases designed by top financial experts. This is accompanied by the Springer book, Financial Modeling. Additionally, we have very good exam preparation, so top learning materials. It's open book and laptop, so you work on it time independent, location independent. You can do that in India, you can do that in South America. It's also available in English, all the case studies. So, and you just work on the case studies according to your own timetable, and the timetable you set by yourself. There's nobody forcing you to turn in something at a specific due date. So that is especially for those who are in the job and are under time pressure. So when they are at the airport, they work a little bit on it. And what is also nice, it's supervised by Professor Hacker and me. So after 3 assignments, you turn in the results and you get direct feedback how it works. So therefore, we have also a very high success rate, 100%, because we accompany all participants. Some are very independent, others need more assistance. So depending on your own skills, you get the assistance you need. For people, we do that in collaboration with the German Stock Exchange. So it's highly renowned. The program is accredited. So basically you can also earn ECTS if you want to. So we have 2 passes, the professional excellence and academic excellence. And for the academic excellence, where you want to earn some credits, you have a kind of presentation and a kind of small oral exams. It's the price is for European relations. It's fair. Maybe for Indian it's high. I don't know. It's for students 1,495 euros, and professionals can apply for a scholarship. So then it's also not too expensive. But I just want to mention it that you not, I don't want to market here our program. I just want to mention it that you learn a little bit about our philosophy, and you can learn more about the programs if you go to our home pages.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure what you told us just now about the CFM program is actually you have opened a gateway for all of us participants, that if they wish to explore this exciting field of financial modeling more, and if they wish to continue to learn from a person like you, they have an opportunity now. And this information is going to be very valuable for all of us. This is a professional credit also, and this also makes us to hone our skills in financial modeling from the best in the world. So, and I'm sure many of us are faculty members here. We can pass on this information to many of our students who will find it useful. Thank you so much for this information, sir. Now, I formally propose the vote of thanks for your session today, sir. Sir, for a person as successful and as busy like you, accepting our invitation was almost what to say, delightful. I mean, we were very happy, very pleased that you have decided and accepted to grace this program, and it has really motivated me even before this session that Professor Ernst is going to take a session. All of us today learned a lot from you, sir. You started off with the very basics of project evaluation techniques like NPV and IRR, and you very lucidly distinguished between the various variations of computations, formula-based and prototype-based. So not only you talked us through the Excel part of it, but you also clarified that what is the financial underpinning of these concepts. You then went on to talk about the data table sensitivity analysis and how important sensitivity analysis is. Unfortunately, we requested you not to cover a scenario because many of us were requesting for Monte Carlo, and it was really great. You introduced us to the tools which you use for the Monte Carlo simulation, and for many of us, it was the first time we learned that these tools are available in Excel add-in form, and I'm sure many of us are going to make use of it. Not only all this, sir, I think perhaps for me as a participant of your session today, for me, I think 4 or 5 things which you told us about the, the do's of financial modeling. What should we do? I mean, how should we approach financial modeling? In between, you were interspersing your talk with some tips about building a good financial model. I think that was too good. For me, that was too good because everything else we have an option to look at from some books or something else. But this knowledge that you gave us about the best practices of financial modeling, I think that is going to stay with me for a very, very long time. And that will perhaps make me, and I hope my colleagues, participants, a better modeler. So, sir, we really do not have words to thank you. Your talk was very lucid. You agreed to pace it slowly so that all of us can understand it well. How do I thank you? I really don't know. All I can say is we from India will remain indebted to your talk. And with your permission, we would like to stay in touch and explore more opportunities where we can have the benefit of your presence. Thank you from all of us, from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you on behalf of our director, our dean, Dr. Nayak, my convener colleagues, Professor Gaurav, Professor Ankit, and all the participants. We from India wish you all the best, good luck, good health for your future, sir. And last, I will try some German. Danke schön. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your attention, for your time. I enjoyed it really very, very much. And I think we proceed with the collaboration and we stay in touch. And I think that was not the last session we met.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And I will make sure that I send you the email of your feedback form by tomorrow latest. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all participants. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all of you.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste from our side. Thank you.